Welcome to Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast. Your chance to learn about the teachings of the Catholic Church on sacred music, both in theory and practice. Through interviews, discussions, and music, your hearts and minds will be lifted up and better understand what it means to sing the praise of His glory. And now, your host, Dr. Jennifer Donaldson-Nowicka.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the 8th season of Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast, the official podcast of the Catholic Institute of Sacred Music. It's been a while since we've been able to publish an episode of the podcast because this year has been an extremely busy and fruitful one for us here at the Catholic Institute of Sacred Music. Since you last heard from us, we've welcomed a second full-time faculty member here at CISM, Dr. Christopher Berry, an amazing choral conductor and organist who is directing our newly established chorister program for young singers, serving as the music director at nearby Nativity Parish, and serving on our faculty for graduate courses and other workshops. You'll be hearing more from him later on this season. We've also launched a summers-based 36-credit Master of Sacred Music degree program and two 20-credit post-baccalaureate certificates in Gregorian chant and sacred choral music, all pending approval from WASC, our accreditor. The deadline to apply is this upcoming Sunday, February 15th. You can still enroll in just one or a few graduate classes, and the deadline for that application is May 1st. We've also launched the McInnes Fellows Program, a paid choral fellowship for our Choral Institute this summer, July 20 to 24. Available to 12 outstanding Catholic singers aged 25 and above, the fellows serve as section leaders and will cut a recording of the pieces of the composition seminar students studying under Dr. Frank LaRocca in our summer seminar. We're pleased also to announce that Martin Baker, formerly of Westminster Cathedral in London, is joining our faculty to teach the organ improvisation seminar that same week. Check out these and all of our 13 classes this summer at our website, catholicinstituteofsacredmusic.org. Click on Summer Classes. Or if you're interested in the degree or certificate programs, click on Graduate Studies. This summer was also busy as we welcomed Cardinal Sarah, Ranjith, and O'Malley, as well as abbots and other bishops and clergy and lay faithful from around the world for our first Phones at Coolman's Sacred Liturgy Summit. It was an amazing 4 days with solemn pontifical liturgies, fantastic talks, and much food for reflection and camaraderie. There's a lot going on here at the Catholic Institute of Sacred Music. Check out all the upcoming events yet this spring semester on our events page, catholicinstituteofsacredmusic.org/events. But now on to our first episode of this season. I'm really delighted to welcome Elizabeth Lemme as one of my first guests of the season. She's a fantastic musician and visual artist who co-directs with her husband, Nicholas Lemme, the children's choir at her parish in Nebraska. She offers her artistic work through an Etsy shop called Pelican Printery Press, and most importantly, she is an amazing homeschooling mom who has built an extraordinary curriculum for her children which prizes immersion in beautiful things. She joins us to talk about the specifics of her curriculum, and I know you'll find it inspiring. Thanks so much for joining me today, Elizabeth. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be back.
So our topic today is building a beautiful homeschooling curriculum and the study of art and music. And you are uniquely qualified to talk about this. All my friends that I know, you have so many gifts in terms of both music and art. And I love what you do with your kids. You're such a great mom. And maybe I'm a little biased because, you know, one of them is my goddaughter, but I'm so in such admiration of what you do. So I'm really happy to have you here and share with our listeners what you do. So could you tell us a little bit about your family and how you started homeschooling?
Yes. So my husband and I, we were not homeschooled. He went to public and Catholic schools and I went to all public schools. But with the birth of our first child, we knew that as musicians and educators, that homeschooling would be a great path to provide just a solid aesthetic formation that's grounded in traditional Catholic teaching. So we have 4 kids, ages currently 10, 8, 5, and 2, and there's one on the way this spring. And we started homeschooling when our oldest was 5. well, I guess it really starts when they're 3 and 4, but officially with the state, it was when she was 5, and she's now 10. So we are still in a very young season of homeschooling, and we don't have any high schoolers yet or even junior high, but we've really enjoyed it so far because we get to design our own classical education, and we can include things that are sometimes, inadequately taught maybe in traditional classroom settings. Maybe there's not enough funding to teach them, um, such as like fine arts appreciation, which is what we're talking about today, Latin, catechism, liturgical living, classical music training, great books, things like that. And another reason why we gravitated towards homeschooling is that we can step away from screens. And this has become more and more important as the years have gone by in the last 5 years. It's like you can focus on what you could call an incarnational approach to education, rather than digital. So using good old-fashioned paper and pencil, reading physical books, painting with real paint, playing musical instruments, going on nature walks. And that's hard to come by in classrooms these days. There's a lot of magic that can happen with just a pencil on a piece of paper, so versus a finger on a screen. And then another reason why we just have really enjoyed homeschooling so far is just the extra quality time with our kids. It's just irreplaceable.
Right. So let's get into some more of the details. So I'm wondering if you could describe what shapes your overall approach to building beautiful things into your curriculum and why you think having beautiful things is so important.
Yeah, so definitely the liturgy is the number one thing that shapes my approach to curriculum, specifically the traditional Latin Mass. We have the privilege to be able to go to our local Fraternity of St. Peter Parish, and so that feeds into a lot of how I structure things. Another big influence is Benedictine spirituality, especially their idea of ora et labora, and the sanctifying of the hours of the day through prayer, and the attention they give to the science and discipline of the arts in the service and praise of God. So that's kind of my second one. And then another one is Aristotelian philosophy. And I'm not a big philosopher, but I know enough to know that our just reliance on screens it's drawn us a little bit out of our five senses, or maybe a lot out of our five senses, and into a digital world. Whereas Aristotle gives us so much wisdom drawn just from the physical world around us. So he talks a lot about the judgment of existence. What's this made of? What is it? What is its form? How was it made? Why was it made? And so these questions are really important because of the incarnation. Our Lord is not some distant idea. I grew up as a Protestant, and it was kind of that God was kind of this thing in your mind. But no, at Mass, there are physical realities that direct our senses, our attention, our imagination, our emotions and intelligences to God. So we hear the chant, we smell the incense, we touch the holy water, we taste the Holy Eucharist, we see the candles and the flowers. So all our senses are awakened at Mass, and they lead us to contemplate the mysteries of the faith. So I think that education needs to awaken the child's senses as well.
Yeah, I wonder if we could go a little bit of a tangent into the idea of screens, because it's come up. And this is something, for example, that I talk a lot about with the seminarians, because I want them to understand that I'm not just having some sort of Luddite aesthetic snob reaction to screens, but there's something fundamentally different about a pixel versus other aspects of reality. And for me, I'm thinking about it and I think, well, a pixel is something that emits light itself and is designed to appear as something else. Whereas the sun emits light as itself, but illuminates other things which have existence in themselves. And to me, that seems like a pretty fundamental metaphysical difference. such that when we look at something in the sunlight versus represented by groups of pixels, they're fundamentally different things, even
Mhm.
though we can be so absorbed into a digital world that we think of them as the same.
Yeah, I've noticed that with my kids, there's a big difference in using the iPad, for spelling exercises. You click on the letter and you drag it over here, versus using a piece of paper. When you get a piece of paper involved and a pencil, then you start involving the weight of your hand, how hard you're pressing on the pencil. Is it going to break the lead? Then we have to sharpen the pencil. What's the shape of your line like? Can we read the letter that you just wrote? There's just an incredible amount of dimension that's added when you're dealing with living things versus a screen. And you spoke about light, and that's a really important component of visual art. And an artist will play with light in really interesting ways that awaken our own attention to light in the real world. Whereas if you just look at if you're just looking at a screen, it's so flat. But then when your attention is drawn to the physical world around you, it just awakens multi-dimensional goodness that can really awaken your senses.
Yeah. So a little further on this before we keep going on curriculum and stuff. I mean, I think about this a lot, in terms of I teach classes on visual arts, and looking at a painting on a screen, you can get like really high res images, which are really interesting and sometimes so much better lighting than when you go see it in a physical space. But in the physical space, you can see how it reflects the light, the goopiness of the paint in one area versus another. There is a way in which those digital images can help us to appreciate the real world, but it
Mm-hmm.
seems to need to be tethered to the real world. And I think, musicians know this a little bit more viscerally when it comes to music, that, we can listen to really great recordings, and listening is an important part of formation as a musician. But at the end of the day, you also have to be able to physically make music, or put yourself in places where people are making music in the same acoustical space in which your body is.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we live in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is not a city with like amazing museums, but there is something really different about seeing a painting live. You see it on kind of a cream colored wall or a gray wall, and it's framed with a beautiful golden frame, and you just see the vibrancy of the colors. And I try and print out pictures and put them on display in our home so that the kids are really exposed to the art, but it definitely does not hold a candle to see it in real life. So it is so important to get to museums when you can, if you live near a bigger city. And hearing music live is totally different experience than seeing it on YouTube, which we utilize, but we definitely keep a close eye on the schedule of our local symphony and the chamber music groups. And there's some churches, the Anglicans usually put on a pretty good concert series and things like that. So definitely it makes a big difference when you see it or hear it live.
Yeah. So back to this question of including beautiful things in your curriculum. What are some basic questions you ask about something as worthy or not to be included in your curriculum?
Separating the sheep and the goats.
Yeah.
So I one person that I like to turn to a lot is a British educator from the 20th century, early 20th century, and her name is Charlotte Mason, and she has her whole own curriculum. And I don't use that exclusively, but I do find her approach to arts and music appreciation helpful. So she said that artwork should have a refining, elevating influence. It should express great ideas, such as great human relationships, relationships of love and service, of authority and obedience, of reverence and piety and neighborly kindness, of relationships to kin and friend and neighbor, to cause and country and kind, to the past and to the present. So Charlotte Mason, she sought to spread before children a feast of art. I think often the Charlotte Mason people refer to it as a feast. You're spreading a feast before them that relays something of a meaning of life. So she says, again, quote, Fra Angelico will tell us of the beauty of holiness. Giotto will confide his interpretation of the meaning of life. Millet will tell us of the simplicity and dignity that belong to labor on the soil. And Rembrandt will show us the sweetness of humanity in many a common countenance. So she's a great person I turn to. And then I personally ask a bunch of different questions when discerning what to include and what not to include. And the most obvious one is whether or not the work is actually done well. Technically, is it in the canon of great art? Is it timeless? Has it stood the test of time? I do include some living composers and artists, but most of these are from the past. So, for example, does the work help the child to enter more imaginatively into a historical event? An example of this would be Respighi's The Pines of Rome. Is such an exciting piece when the Roman army is marching home after a victory. The kids love listening to that one. Another question would be, does the work help a child enter more imaginatively into a fairy tale or a good story? So for example, today we're doing Stravinsky this week. So today we read The Firebird and then we listened to Stravinsky's incredibly exciting ballet for The Firebird, and we'll watch it later too. But it's just the final hymn of The Firebird is so exciting and it just makes the story come alive. There's so many examples of fairy tales set to great music, like Grieg's In the Hall of the Mountain King. And this isn't really a fairy tale, but Mozart's The Magic Flute, Prokofiev's famous Peter and the Wolf, definitely a favorite. But I also like to turn to the lesser known ones too, like Poulenc has a setting of the story of Babar, which is really adorable. And another question I ask is, does the artwork or music make an aspect of nature more memorable? So there's tons of really fun music about nature. So the most famous one being Vivaldi's Four Seasons and the trilling of the birds and the violins in the spring movement. Another one would be Smetana's The Moldau River, the Schubert Trout Quintet. In art, there's millions, the Hudson River School and their magnificent landscapes. There's an artist named Frederick Edwin Church who painted icebergs. It's really beautiful. And the Northern Lights, really unusual things that say something about nature. And another question I ask is, does it make an aspect of our humanity more memorable? So I think of Beethoven in his later years when he was deaf. He wrote really introspective, contemplative music it's memorable because it's almost bizarre. It's kind of spacey, but very beautiful. And it illustrates something about human suffering that's really profound. And in Schubert, he has these darkly expressive song cycles, even Prokofiev in like his angsty toccata for the piano where they're like banging and the kids are like, are they really allowed to bang on the piano like that? So and finally, another question I ask is, does the music awaken a new devotion? So one example from my personal life would be Rachmaninoff's Vespers and its beautiful Marian devotion. I about fell out of my chair when I realized that it was about Our Lady, and that really played into my conversion to the Catholic faith. Arvo Pärt has really profound word painting in a lot of his choral music, The Woman with the Alabaster Box. And in art, there's Fra Angelico and the purity of his Annunciation scene. So in sum, when I'm asking, should I include this art or not? I like to say children really deserve the best. Nothing needs to be watered down. It shouldn't be children's music or children's art. You can just feed it to them as it is, just as Tchaikovsky wrote it, just as, Ravel wrote the string quartet, so that we spread a feast before them of just the best timeless masterpieces.
Before we move on, here's something important about the Master of Sacred Music degree at the Catholic Institute of Sacred Music. Sacred music is a means of profound encounter with God in the sacred liturgy. That's why we here at the Catholic Institute of Sacred Music are committed to making sure every Catholic in every parish and every school can experience that encounter with Christ through the beauty and truth of the Church's sacred music tradition. We form faithful Catholics to grow in holiness while leading sacred music at the very highest level of musical artistry, performance, and pedagogical skill, handing on the Church's treasury of sacred music with genuine excellence. Through this formation, CISM equips them to serve as parish music directors and Catholic school teachers, enabling them to build vibrant, prayerful programs that draw countless souls closer to God. If you are someone who wants to become both a saint and the best musician that you can possibly be, our summer-based Master of Sacred Music, a 36-credit graduate degree program launching in summer 2026 at St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park, California, is for you. You'll be immersed in the tradition through a rigorous curriculum. Theological and liturgical foundations like history and principles of sacred music, liturgical theology, history of the Roman Rite, the Psalms, sacred music and canon law, practical mastery in vocal pedagogy, introduction to Gregorian chant, plus advanced seminars on modes, conducting, semiology, rhythm, manuscript study, and performance practice. Choral leadership with choral conducting, rehearsal techniques, group vocal pedagogy, and a full choral lit survey. Plus specialized courses in parish sacred music program management, organ electives like improvisation and chant accompaniment, and even a class on philosophical questions about beauty. Daily sung liturgy, Mass in the morning, Vespers in the evening, anchors the rhythm of study. During the fall and spring terms, we meet for weekly online colloquia, and you'll study applied voice lessons locally with a teacher you choose. A capstone project synthesizes theology, pedagogy, music, and pastoral ministry in your home parish or school setting. It's flexible for working professionals, completable in 3 to 5 summers with intensive on-campus weeks and off-site elements during the regular school year. This formation is guided by a world-class faculty of Catholic sacred music scholars and practitioners, internationally acclaimed experts in Gregorian chant, choral conducting, organ, vocal pedagogy, composition, liturgy, and more, all dedicated to handing on the Church's treasury with fidelity and artistry. Applications are open, but the deadline is just days away, February 15th, 2026. If you're feeling called to lead sacred music in a parish or school, or know someone who is, go to CatholicInstituteofSacredMusic.org and click on Graduate Study right now. Download the brochure, review the full curriculum, and get your application in. This is the program you've been looking for. It will shape you into the person you want to be and empower you to serve the body of Christ with fidelity and beauty, becoming, in the words of St. Elizabeth of the Trinity, a praise of his glory. Now back to the show. I'm wondering, if we can get into some more curricular questions now. So let's talk about music curriculum. Obviously this is a huge topic, but I'm wondering if you could just give an overview of what you do for structuring your music curriculum with the kids.
So to structure it, we have, I've scheduled 36 weeks in our school year. Usually it's from August 15th until May 15th. So in our school day, we do all the typical, just mundane book work that you have to do, like math, handwriting, grammar. But then I have something else that I call the memory board, and it's just a large framed board that's on display. We homeschool in the dining room, and so I try to make it nice. And every week I post a new set of memory statements for different subjects. And so that includes history, science. We have a memory statement for catechism, even etiquette, a scripture memory verse, and geography. So those are kind of our little categories. And also is a category for a composer and an artist. So each year that's a presentation of 36 different composers and 36 different artists. And we repeat the same group of composers and artists every year, unless I discover someone amazing that I forgot. And for the composers, we just we study them primarily by listening to them, not as background music, but we try to listen to it intentionally. We don't do any hefty analysis. My kids are still really young, so we'll save that for later. But we just listen to it. And so since my kids are little, I let them, the little guys, play with Play-Doh or draw, or sometimes we listen to it in the car. We just turn it up really loud. Um, so the approach is immersive. So if there are children's picture books about the composer, we read those. And definitely, if there is a live performance, we attend that. A little tidbit about the structure is that I don't go in chronological order. And I know that some people might make them bristle, but we don't start with the Middle Ages and go in chronological order. And this is inspired by the pedagogue Nadia Boulanger, because when she programmed her concerts, she didn't go in chronological order. She juxtaposed works in pretty stark contrast. Like she would put Stravinsky up against Monteverdi. And her idea was that the music can dialogue across the eras. And I find that with kids, it kind of keeps it fresh and surprising. And it avoids the idea that can happen in music or art appreciation courses, that music improves over time, because music doesn't improve over time, it just changes. So I try and avoid that idea by teaching by contrast.
That's great. Avoiding Heideggerian thoughts about the evolution of history are always good, I think. So could you describe what resources and outside teachers you rely on?
Yes. Well, for classical, for the playing of musical instruments, we can do a lot of it ourselves still, because our kids are young, but our oldest 10, we're starting to farm that out now. So that's for the area of, playing the instruments. But for music appreciation, we rely a lot on live performances. Like I said earlier, the Chamber Music Society, the university. Otherwise, like when we have to press play on the stereo, we just got a Spotify membership with no ads, which has been very user friendly. Ads can be very disruptive. Adagio is another good streaming option for classical music. That's like adagio, but with an I. Occasionally, we watch a YouTube video. For example, Haydn's Farewell Symphony is fun to watch because they can see the musicians leaving the stage one by one and extinguishing their music stand lights. It's a really neat story. Certain conductors and artists are engaging to watch, like Dudamel or Leonard Bernstein. I have a long list of favorite authors and books. Some highlights would be the books about composers by Wheeler, and some picture books for the little kids by Salenza. And Masterworks Classics has kind of fun narrations of stories set to classical music, which can make it come alive. There's, again, for really little kids, there are these books called the Story Orchestra books that play snippets of the classical music alongside the story. And it kind of introduces little kids to the idea of leitmotifs. And and the Leonard Bernstein, he has a series of children's concerts that are neat to watch as well.
Can you spell for listeners Wheeler and Salenza, those two authors?
Yeah, Wheeler's great. They're really old school. Wheeler, and then Salenza is Celenza.
Great. Thanks. So how do you incorporate singing at home throughout the day? I know that there is a lot of singing. The last time we visited, there were a lot of songs about robots, I recall.
Yes. So for this, we are guided by the liturgical year. At the start of school, if things are going well, we open by singing the Marian antiphon of the season. So, like this morning, we sang the Alma Redemptoris Mater, but pretty soon it'll be time to sing the Ave Regina Caelorum. We just do the chant. I sometimes add a hymn according to the season, depending on if it's Advent, Christmas, or Lent. Other places where we sing is at lunch, especially if it's a feast day. We don't you don't have to go crazy with singing. You don't have to sing every lunchtime, but it's nice to highlight a feast day by singing.
You mean you don't live in a perpetual opera?
No. We will you could sing the Angelus at lunch, or you could we sometimes sing the meal blessing in Latin. Another good time to do singing is at bedtime. So we usually sing the Marian antiphon again at bedtime. And sometimes also one of the chants from Compline. I just love Compline, like the Salva Nos is a really, really nice one to sing. And the kids, they start to associate that with bedtime, which is a really neat way to enter Compline. And an important note is I don't always sit down and teach the song in detail. I mean, the kids, they're already in a children's choir. They're learning to sing there, and they're already doing piano lessons. So when we do singing at home, we just sing it. And the little kids catch on over time just by immersion. And, I'm always surprised after singing it again and again, even though I've never taught my 5-year-old, I've never sat down and taught him the technique or the word. He just knows it because we do it so much. And it's the approach that our parish priest takes at Mass too. He started a little tradition where we sing the Marian antiphon right after the last gospel at every Sunday Mass. And at first, no one knew it, no one sang along, but we've been doing this for like 4 years now, and now everybody just belts it out. It's awesome. So.
Could you talk a little bit too? I know that you do some improvisation and composition work, especially with your oldest. How have you structured that, or is it just kind of discovery and play?
She loves to noodle around, and some of my other kids, they have different interests. They don't as much, but they're also young. So, but she likes to noodle around, and so I give her music theory work to do every day in this little workbook. And if I hear her, not doing the assigned theory and she's like noodling around instead of doing it, I don't stop her because I'm hearing really interesting ideas. It might be working with half steps and whole steps or like triads. And she starts to noodle around with the triads. So I just let her noodle for a while until it starts to get out of control. And she needs to finish the work eventually, so we finish it. But I do allow for her to have that freedom, and with her practice too, when she's practicing for her piano lessons, if I notice her getting off track and noodling, I just let her do it. And the theory, really, the practical, disciplined music theory assignments, they just kind of blossom into these new ideas. So we start to put them down onto paper. I help her, at her young age. She still needs help notating things, but we have to take the time to sit down and write them down or re-record them and things like that. So she loves to come up with new ideas for improv. So I try to feed her the concrete theory, and then she will take that, and I just give her the freedom to flesh those out.
It's so great. I mean, we've talked about this, and that so much of conservatory training in the 20th century made people terrified of improvising. And,
Yes.
I remember having to teach improv for the first time, and it was in class piano at UNL, and I myself had never improvised before. So here I am supposed to be teaching other people improv, and I had to make myself do it, but it was terrifying because that was just kind of beaten out of you
Yeah.
in 20th century musical training.
Yes. Yeah, I think people are intimidated by it because they think it has to be all free and you can only do it if you're really talented, and you should just be able to sit down and improvise whatever. But you start with ideas, and they're really concrete ideas. Like you start with a tetrachord, or you start with please come up with a melody that's in Lydian mode, and use a quotation from this chant. Like take this chant, the Jesu, what is that? Yes, thank you, Jesu Dulcis. Take that melody and turn it into, something in a different mode. So you start with a concrete idea, and then it's less intimidating because it's never just this, wishy-washy free thing. It always starts with a concrete idea.
Yeah. That's what I love about the word method, right? That it starts with a musical conversation and you're getting
Yeah.
tossed a ball and you have a conversation and then you move to question and answer and it's so logical and disarming once you feel like you can make those first steps.
Yeah.
So let's talk about visual art curriculum and how do you structure that and what resources you use for that. You mentioned already the Charlotte Mason a little bit, but I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, so this is pretty similar to the composers. I structure it the same way. We have 36 weeks, so that's 36 artists. And I just print out 3 works by the artists that I think highlights their style. And I put them in display frames that are easy to change from week to week. And I find all the works on Wikimedia Commons, make sure they're in the public domain, have them all printed at the local print shop. Obviously, it's not as amazing as a live one, but the idea is to just have it out on display. And as soon as the week is done, I file the artwork back into the proper folder. And organizing is important, so it's all done up front and ready for the year because life happens, kids get sick. So at least I know that I can open up the folder that I need and put it out on display, and it's there. And it holds us accountable to do it too. So when I present the art, we identify just basic things, whether the painting is a landscape, a portrait, or a still life. And then we just ask a lot of questions about the art to build a state of wonder before the painting. So I might ask my kids, if you were going to paint this, what colors would you put on the palette? And sometimes I have them take crayons and color it. If it's a Rembrandt, so they'll discover if it's a Rembrandt, there will be a lot of browns and blacks. And so then that can lead you to the idea of chiaroscuro. And same for George de la Tour. There's a lot of shadowy darks because he loved those nighttime paintings. But there's also these vivid splashes of vermilion red in his paintings. So if you just approach color from a very basic standpoint, it'll tell them a lot about their style and they'll get to know them that way. If the artist is an impressionist, there will be a lot of blues in the palette. So the kids start to remember those things about each artist. And other questions that are fun to ask children, and you don't need a fancy curriculum for this, you can just ask the questions, appealing to their 5 senses. What might you smell in this painting? What might you hear? What would you feel with your hands? And you can get some really fascinating answers. So one time we were looking at a portrait of a lady with an umbrella by Edward Manet, not Monet, but Manet. My 8-year-old said, I would hear a rustle of silk from her dress and the smell of perfume. And in the really famous painting by Botticelli called La Primavera, there's a bunch of Greek gods and goddesses in a forest. And so I asked one of my kids, what would you smell in this painting? And she said, I would smell peaches. And I thought, what is she talking about? And when I took a closer look, I saw that all the Greek gods and goddesses were situated under a grove of orange trees.
Oh.
So it's not that far off. And so it's entering into these concrete details that make the paintings memorable for the kids. And I think that's so important to make it memorable because we're competing with just a bombardment of images on our kids through screens, through advertisements, just everywhere there are images. And what we want to create is a mental photograph of each painting in the mind that can stay there for life. And what this does is it builds good aesthetic taste in just kind of a natural, organic way. And hopefully that will help my kids gravitate towards great works of art rather than the cheaper, more banal images.
Could you talk a little bit about calligraphy and illumination? I know that this is something that you do, and I have bought your coloring sheets. For example, you have a great one that we're going to use of an illuminated Alleluia for burying the Alleluia. But what do you do with your kids in terms of calligraphy and illumination?
Well, my kids see me doing it a lot. It's kind of something I like to do at night after they go to bed. So my 10-year-old is always at, can I get a fountain pen? Can I get a calligraphy pen? So we do take some time. We take a lot of time on handwriting. That's really important to me. And sometimes we blossom that into just basic calligraphy, where we emphasize guidelines. You have to stay in between the lines, and this is how you form the letter. I choose my handwriting curriculum really carefully. There's some really good curriculum out there that emphasizes the gesture and the order that you do the gestures for each letter. So it makes a big difference if you start on the top and go to the bottom versus starting at the bottom and going to the top. So we do a lot of forming letters in the air with our hands, building the letters with blocks, things like that. And all of that can kind of lead to calligraphy. But the kind of unpleasant discovery about calligraphy is that it's a lot of guidelines. But that's such a great tool for life lessons because we have to have guidelines to live a moral life. So a lot of guidelines. And as far as the coloring pages, I really enjoy making coloring pages that are led by the liturgical year. So I have coloring pages for Christmas or Lent. And so I might read them a Bible story and have them color while I'm reading it. And I have Christmas coloring pages. So I'll read, Christmas books or Christmas stories while they color that. And there's all kinds of ornamentation in the borders. And so they learn about basic symbolism of garden imagery, flowers that are associated with Our Lady, flowers and plants that are associated with the Eucharist, things like that.
Yeah. Where can people find your coloring pages?
They can find them on my Etsy shop. I have an Etsy shop called Pelican Printery House.
Great. So let's answer some questions that parents who don't have a lot of formal training in music or art might be wondering about at this point. What would you say to those people who don't have this formalized training like you, but see the value of adding really beautiful things and making them a cornerstone in their curriculum?
Yes. So I think there's a danger when it comes to music appreciation and art appreciation. There's a danger in overcomplicating it and buying all kinds of curriculum here and there and then never doing it because it's so daunting. Some people over plan. It might seem like I am too, but my big thing is to just press the play button. For classical music, if you can't get to a concert, just press the play button so that they can hear it. And don't think that it has to be children's music. It doesn't have to be, Baby Einstein, or a lot of people get stuck on Peter and the Wolf and then call it good, or Carnival of the Animals, call it good. And that's a lot of curriculum just has the children's genre of classical music. And I love them too. I think they're brilliant, but you have to also give them what you would give adults. So just press play. I think just exposure to it, letting them listening to it is important. And also I was going to say for singing in the home, if you don't know how to read the music, the CMAA has the entire parish book of chant on their website, and you can just press play for that as well. They're good recordings. And some other resources that parents might find helpful. I relate to this because I am not a scientist. I have to find good resources for science. I'm not a mathematician, so I have to find good resources. So for parents that are less familiar with music and art, one place you could turn is the humanities syllabus that Bishop Conley has been releasing month by month. You can find it on the Diocese of Lincoln website. I think the website is lincolndiocese.org/syllabus. So what this is Bishop Conley released once a month throughout the year 2025 in our diocesan newspaper a list which features great books, poetry, music, art, and film. And it's this collection of things has like a certain theme. and they're organized seasonally. And just 1 month gives ample time to examine each item. So that might be a good place to start. Other places I might suggest are Kenneth Clark's Story of Civilization can be an interesting way to enter into art and architecture. St. Augustine Academy Press, they either have released it already or they're about to, but it's an art and religion course that I helped review. And it's called Great Pictures and Their Stories. And there's another one called Art Through Religion. And if parents are looking for lists of great composers and artists, they can also go to Charlotte Mason websites. So one of them is called Ambleside Online, and it just has an overwhelming list of great composers and artists. And another one is called Mater Amabilis, which is like the Catholic version of Charlotte Mason. And again, it has long lists of great artists and composers, and access to it is free.
I was hoping to convince you to give us your lists of composers and artists, or even at least part of it.
Yeah. Would you like to hear?
Yes.
Okay. So composers. The first 2 weeks are on Bach, and he does keep coming back because he's so amazing. So we let him make.
He comes Bach.
Good one. So the first 2 weeks are Bach. Third week is Debussy, then Mozart, then Respighi, because I love the Pines of Rome. Tchaikovsky is next. We watch the key there is to watch the ballets. Prokofiev is after that. Handel is one of our favorites. Ravel, especially his string quartet. Beethoven, and then week 11 is Edward Grieg with his In the Hall of the Mountain King. Chopin is week 12. Week 13 is Philip Glass, and he's really fun to listen to in the car. Heinrich Bieber is week 14. He wrote the Rosary Sonatas. Palestrina is week 15. Dvorak is week 16. And then Haydn, Rameau, Mendelssohn. And Mendelssohn is great for Shakespeare lovers. Stravinsky is right now, week 20. That's what we're on right now. And again, this one is great to watch the ballets, especially for the Rite of Spring. Week 21 is Aaron Copland, and this is one of our favorites. Appalachian Spring is so beautiful. Brahms is week 22, and Poulenc is week 23. He has some really interesting sacred music. He has the narration and piano for the Babar stories, which are really sweet. Monteverdi is week 24, and I highly recommend if you can find a children's choir singing the Vespers by Monteverdi. Children really like that. Week 25 is Darius Milhaud, who has really fun chamber music, really interesting. Week 26, I think this is new this year, actually. I added Leon Bellman and his really cool Suite Gothique for the organ. Rachmaninoff, and week 28 is Schubert. 29 is Arvo Pärt, another favorite. Week 30 is Robert Schumann. Week 31 is Vivaldi. 32 is Telemann. 33 is Benjamin Britten, Liszt, Messiaen, and the catalog.
Oh, good. I was wondering if
and then we always end with Mussorgsky pictures at an exhibition.
That's great. What's your list of the visual artists?
Yes, so the artists, and I know there's just so many artists and so little time. We don't have any ancient art on the list, but we do cover that when we do like our Egypt study unit or the Greek, So this is later, kind of starting in the medieval time. Raphael is first, and then we do Manet, and then we do Monet. Then it's Georges de la Tour, Botticelli, Degas. The girls love the ballet dancers. Seurat is week 7, and he's definitely a favorite because of his really bizarre technique in pointillism, and kids find that really fascinating, and it's great for color theory. And we try it too. We try to do it. Week 8 is Rembrandt, and then it's Edward Hopper, Caspar David Frederick, John Singer Sargent, which is another favorite, James McNeill Whistler, J.M.W. Turner. Little boys really like that. There's all these dramatic scenes of fires on the ocean and storms, and it's really cool. Dürer, I might be mispronouncing some of these. Da Vinci, I think it's Bierstadt. It's Bierstadt. He painted the Yosemite Valley. This is great for American history. And when you're talking about the settlers heading west, Jean Van Eyck, and we had to include Van Gogh, Peter de Hoek, wonderful painting of a courtyard of a house in Delft. Matisse is this week. Again, just the vibrant colors and textures there, fun. Mary Cassatt, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah.
American beloved painter of children and mothers. It's great. Diego Velázquez, Maurice Denis, who has some really fun scenes from Catholic culture, like altar boys in procession, girls dressed up for Holy Communion. They're really charming. Giotto and Bruegel, who has a really epic image of the Tower of Babel that my kids really like. Now this I don't know how to pronounce, but it's Olga Bożnanska, a Polish artist. Hans Holbein the Younger, who has really amazing portraits. Vermeer, Fra Angelico, Frederick Edwin Church, Caravaggio, Rogier van der Weyden, Henry Osawa Tanner, Vuillard, and then I spend the last 2 weeks on the pre-Raphaelites.
Oh boy. Well, I'm sure that's a fun way to end with pre-Raphaelites.
It is
so much
yeah.
Catholic imagery amongst them.
Yes, there is. Yeah, Bible stories. Yeah.
Let's wrap up by just talking about what do you hope is the long-term legacy on the souls and minds of your children from this curriculum you've built for them?
So my hope is to make artist and composer names common household names. When my kids are young, I want to give them a treasury of composers, names of artists, names of pieces. The kids refer to the Rite of Spring as the Boom Boom song, which my 2-year-old has picked up on, and now she was calling it the Boom Boom song. So building in their memory a treasury of names of pieces, names of paintings, building even a memory bank of melodies. I love hearing my 5-year-old humming the Jupiter theme from Holst the Planets, or remembering certain color palettes from different styles of art. I hope that they can build an interior database of favorite or memorable compositions which align with events in history, which help them remember historical events better, and also that align with certain aspects of the liturgy and our faith. My hope is that these works of art and music can stick in the mind more than all the other images that they are bombarded with. You know, again, we said by screens and by secular society, and ultimately that it attracts them throughout their life, building in them good aesthetic taste and a real attraction to that which is objectively beautiful. And ultimately, I hope that this quality time with great music and art equips them with an inner stillness and a sense of wonder and even a receptivity that prepares them for a life of prayer and contemplation of God.
Right. Thank you so much for this wealth of information and sharing just a snapshot of the beautiful things that you do for your children so well. They're so lucky to have you as their teacher. And I'm really grateful that you shared this with our listeners.
Thank you very much for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast with Dr. Jennifer Donaldson-Nowicka. For more information about this episode, sacred music resources, or upcoming events, visit our website at sacredmusicpodcast.com. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. If you enjoy our podcast, please write us a review on iTunes. This improves our iTunes ranking and helps others find out about the podcast. The music you heard at the beginning of this episode is Hec Dies by William Byrd, sung by the London Oratory Schola Cantorum Boys Choir, directed by Charles Cole from the CD Sacred Treasures of England. The music at the conclusion of this podcast is from the Prelude and Fugue in G Major, BWV 550 by Johann Sebastian Bach, performed by Jennifer Donaldson-Novitska. We look forward to having you join us next time, and until then, may we sing the praise of His glory.